What is up, guys? This is the Christopher Rennie Show, and this is your host, Christopher Rennie, bringing you episode 9. Before this episode starts, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Chris Rennie Show, and do not forget to like the Mom's Basement Productions Instagram page. On this episode, we're going to be talking the new collective bargaining agreement that the NFL owners agreed on, and why the players won't let it fly. We'll also be talking about the Deontay Wilder Tyson Fury fight, on top of other sporting events that are happening in the sports world. Thank you as always, and enjoy the show. I can't do this anymore. What's this guy saying? Who gave these national radio hosts these jobs? Jeez. Can't even understand that guy. What's he even talking about? I can't take it anymore. Those national media personalities making you feel like that, make a change. Listen to this idiot about the sports that matter from the opinion that matters. Haha, you said it, not me. Now for today's takes from the most opinionated host in sports talk. The NFL has done it again. We're talking about a collective bargaining agreement that might as well be an epic failure, or a failure of epic proportions. The time the owners did this last was a while ago. I think it was in 2011. And it ended up in a lockout, as these CBAs tend to do. So when you look into the history of NFL collective bargaining agreements, this is an important part of how the players are treated. And yes, there was a lockout following the end of the 2010 season. A work stoppage imposed by the owners of the NFL's 32 teams lasted from March 12th to July 25th, when the owners and NFL players, represented by the National Football League Players Association, could not come to a consensus on a new collective bargaining agreement. Now, this collective bargaining agreement is interesting. This time, the owners discussed a new collective bargaining agreement, or in layman's terms, a new CBA. In the CBA, there was an increase in games to 17 with the elimination of one preseason game. There's also going to be playoff expansion that's proposed to 7 teams in each conference, and a new revenue sharing breakdown. There are a lot of complexities to make this a lot more confusing for players and people like myself who do not necessarily know the ins and outs of what a contract in this business should or shouldn't look like. Because when I look at those numbers that they talk about, and I'm going to get to those in a second, it feels like it's a lot of money, and they're getting a lot more money. But then you look at one specific set of numbers, and it might seem like these players are getting cheated a little bit. So, to me, regardless of the deal, the NFL players do make a ton of money. The league minimum's like $450,000. That's going to get a bump. I mean, 6 figures a year is still life-changing money, period. But when you look at the revenue and the amount of money, the annual revenue, the NFL brings in, increasing their wages a little bit more does not seem too far out of consideration, And a lot of the stuff in the CBA sounds really good, and I think a lot of it is good, and it's progress. And for a starting point, I think it's great. But some of the proposals from the owners come off as very disingenuous. Like the monetary split. I think that comes off as disingenuous. The other aspects that come off as disingenuous to me is the pace the owners want this done by. They're already pushing to get this CBA passed, moved forward, and moved on. But what people do in business when it's a bad deal for the other side is they rush it. They want this deal done now. And for the players and the NFLPA, I think it would be in their best interest to take a step back, sort of look at this as a collective, see where these players are getting the short end of the stick, and see where they can improve this for their players. Because after every single CBA, guess what? The players still come away with problems. And whose fault's that? I'm not going to say it's the owners. I'm going to put it on the people who are making these deals. So now the bunch of billionaires, the 32 billionaires that own NFL teams, who make a ton of money off the players' backs, have hired very, very crafty neutral parties to draft up this new CBA. And that also throws up a red flag because now you know that they are trying to get complications put in front of the players and the Players Association. So it's a lot harder to get this done. And they can also throw the blame on the people who drafted the proposals. Smart move on their part, but that's a sign of shade. So yes, the NFL started a new CBA, and the last CBA disagreement, there was the NHL one, I remember that one, and the NBA one where the season got shortened to like 66 games. That was a tough one. As long as we're not missing games, I don't care how this turns out. This league makes millionaires every day, and I think the players deserve a right to a little bit more money at the same time. I could think both. I think they're paid fairly, and I also think that they can be paid more. So to read through some of the wages / economic aspects of this, it's going to be a little complex here for a few minutes. I'm going to try to break down my best. So 47% of AR, already confusing. They're throwing acronyms at me. But I'm going to guess that stands for annual revenue in 2020 plus approximately $100 million in new player costs above current CBA for 2020. Guaranteed 48% share of revenue in 2021, with the ability to increase the percentage to 48.5% share through a media kicker, which applies in any season the league plays 17 games. So if you increase that by 0.5%, they say over 10 years, the players will get $5 billion more dollars to be paid to them. That's just 5%. That's a huge projected increase. And I think if you really wanted to go this way and go this route, you got to give the players at least 49.5% of the revenue share. Now, you guys are the billionaires that own the team, so you obviously did this and you did the math and you hired very smart professionals to do the math on how this league functions, how the teams are ran, and how much. And you're going to give us these boogeyman ideas like, if we give you that extra 1%, we're not going to be able to pay for this stuff in the stadium. And I think that's a lie. All right, I know how much Jerry World pulls in without the NFL. It's a lot. I'm not going to get into numbers because I don't have them in front of me, but I know Jerry World with the concerts and the other events in college football makes a ton of money on the side. I know the Mercedes-Benz Superdome, the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia, and that new stadium up in Minnesota is making a ton of money for the economy, for the owner, and for everybody involved. Now, you think about that increase, what's this going to mean on salary? So minimum salaries will get a $100K increase in 2020 for rookie minimums, another $50K increase in 2021, and then $45,000 increase each year after. At least $90,000 increase in 2020 for the other minimum salary players, $80K to $105K increase in 2021, and then $45K increase each year after. Right to use rookie distribution pool to provide additional payments to players at minimum salaries to keep minimum salaries in line with cap growth. So that makes a lot of sense. All these numbers are starting to add up a little bit. You're increasing minimums, that's good. Bottom line for players, it's great. Increase in minimum salary benefit. More benefits, that's good. Creation of new 4-year player benefit up to an additional $1.25 million in salary excluded from the cap for up to 2 players. That's huge. It lets you sign other players for more, lets you keep everyone on the roster a little bit longer. Performance-based pay increased to $8.5 million in 2020 and $10 million in 2021 with annual increases thereafter. That means bonuses. The bonus pool increased. That's awesome. Average increase in minimum team cash spending to 90% over tranches of 3 to 4 year periods. So all the money stuff is interesting. 5th year options fully guaranteed for 4th and 5th years at the time option is exercised. Amount of option dependent on player achievement and no longer based on which slot selected in first round. So they're changing that 5th year. So you'll be... This is actually, I think this is a good rule. So by the time you get there, so say you make a Pro Bowl, you're going to get paid the average Pro Bowler salary for your position in that 5th year option, which is going to give those players a little bit more reason to take the option. Smart. And it's going to pay the players a fully guaranteed wage for that season. So you're going to get a natural increase if you have lived up to your potential or exceeded it. And from then on, the amount of money you make is going to be based on however you do after that, which is typical in contracts. I think this is sort of their way of giving the franchise tag a new sexy name called a 5th year option that pays you based on player achievement versus we're franchise tagging you. You're stuck with us for another 2-3 years or until we can't afford the franchise tag on you. They're increasing pay for all off-season activities. That's a good move, I think. If they're working, they should get paid. Now, here is another part of this. This is hours in training camp. Introduction of a 5-day acclimation period. 2.5-hour limit on padded and full-speed practices. Limit time at facility during a given workday. Limit of 16 days in pads. No more than 3 consecutive days for 3 out of the 5 weeks. No more than 2 consecutive days for 2 out of the 5 weeks. That's one rule I don't think players really care about. Coaches can add contact without pads. They can take away contact with pads. It all depends on what they want to do. I think when you throw on the pads, it doesn't make you any more uncomfortable than when you don't have them on. You're still going to be wearing helmets. You're still going to be running full speed drills. So there's really no added benefit to this rule. It's a hard rule to police, and it's a rule that if, say, a team breaks it, they're just going to get a fine. So I think that's just the owners trying to sound like they have the players' best interest, but it's honestly going to hurt the product on the field, and it's going to hurt the players getting acclimated to full contact. In the first week of training camp, there's 2 days off and 1 day every 7 thereafter. Limit of 4 joint practices if 3 preseason games. So if the 17-game regular season's accepted, there's going to be a limit of 4 joint practices. So that's when, like in Hard Knocks this past year when the Raiders and Texans had a joint practice. So these are good improvements to working conditions, mandated improvements to visiting team locker rooms, established standards for rehabilitation facilities, training rooms, and equipment for each club, active squad increased by 1 offensive lineman, development of improved safety metrics for fields. So awesome. And then benefit increases. Active players, pension increase of 10%. So once you play 3 years in the league, that pension has been increased 10%. 401k matching contributions increased to $30K, annual increases thereafter, which happens still, but it's starting at $30,000 now. Tuition reimbursement, so that's going to help you repay for your school. Life insurance, important. Adding vision coverage to healthcare plan, that seems interesting that they don't have that on there already. injury protection of 100% of salary up to $2 million, and extended injury protection of 100% of salary up to $1 million. Termination pay, increase in mid-season, signing benefit to 35% of remaining salary or 2 weeks' salary at the applicable minimum salary amount. Right to collect a second time in some instances. Practice squad players eligible for $5,000 of tuition benefits a year and 401k with $1,500 match. And then this is going to expand pension eligibility to all former players with 3 accredited season. Establish $50,000 HRA for vested veterans with no HRA. Creation of new network of hospitals in each team city for former players to receive no-cost physicals, preventative care, mental health counseling, and outpatient orthopedic services. Rights. Clear parameters for ownership and usage for data from sensors, overall reduction in on-field fines, reduction in club fines, implementation of a neutral decision maker for most commissioner discipline cases, and the golden ticket. Changes to drug policy. Narrows the testing window of THC from 4 months to 2 weeks at the start of training camp. So you just get tested once, and after that, weed is tight. Reduces the penalties to players who test positive for THC, eliminating any game suspension strictly for positive tests. And then reduces the number of players subjected to testing for THC. Increases the nanogram limit from 35 to 150. So that's the amount of weed you can have in your body. And they also added a right to be paid over 34-week pay period versus 17 weeks. New workers' comp process to enable easier filings for players, making injury care more accessible. So, in this new CBA deal, there is a lot, and I hopefully didn't bore you to death reading through it. Hopefully, if you haven't read it yourself, you found that very interesting and felt that you learned a lot and got it. Shout out to Daryl, what's his name? Heitner. Created Heitner Legal, authored 2 sports law books, founded Sports Agent Blog in 2005, formerly with Forbes and Inc., taught at Indiana and UF Law, UF 40 under 40. So Florida graduate, Darren Heitner, legal guy, knows a lot about sports legalities, obviously. He's tweeting about it, so he has to know about it. And for all things CBA, I'd give this guy a follow because so far he seems to be pretty knowledgeable on the topic itself. Me, on the other hand, am just going to give you a lot of opinion based in everything I'm seeing online. J.J. Watt said he does not like this. He said, hard no to the new CBA deal. Well, J.J., a 17-game regular season doesn't really concern you anyways because you're only going to pay about 10. Boom, roasted. But a lot of players had some displeasure with it. David Bakhtiari said a 48% revenue share, know your worth. David Bakhtiari, you're a good football player. But that name on your jersey is worth a lot more than you'll ever be. And that's not to be mean or discredit where you're at in your career. But knowing your worth is important. But having the wherewithal to know that 48% of revenue is a lot of money. And 48.5%, that's a $5 billion increase. And now I love the thought of going for 50 and 50. But the thing is, NFL owners own sports teams for a reason. It's because they're very smart guys. They're very smart businessmen, and they know how to make a deal. So when it comes to this new CBA, you got a significant increase. And that is something to be proud of. The weed penalties are almost gone. That is the NFL moving forward and being more progressive. That's where it's positive. And looking at this new CBA deal, it's a lot more player-friendly than the last one. So this conversation we need to have, where will this benefit the players? The players are going to be benefited with the pension, absolutely. Post-playing, the 3 years, the amount of people who are going to be eligible for this pension, That's going to be huge. That is great for your life after. You always have money coming in. It's important. It's how they pay it forward to what you did in the league. And it's not a lot of money, but it's enough to help you out when you need it. Now, you look at the marijuana penalties. And now, a lot of players in the league have gotten away with smoking marijuana for a long time. And few players have been busted for it. Josh Gordon. So now I think if you're going to change the way these suspensions work, you're also going to have to change around the types of punishment players get for testing positive again. Because now the standard has changed. And when it comes to testing for marijuana, it should not be treated as it was, where you're losing a full season of work because you tested positive for this banned substance. It doesn't even really feel banned anymore. 180 nanograms in the blood sounds like a lot, and it probably is a lot. I'm not a weed scientist. I'm not a weed guy. But a lot of players find it to be soothing. It helps the brain. I know CBD oil. I was at a convention for it this past weekend, and it is a very interesting health booster. It helps players mentally. It helps players relax. It de-stresses. It also, CBD has shown that it helps brain activity, and it helps with inflammation in your body, which is something players deal with every single day. So adding all these aspects to it is going to be huge moving forward. And now being able for players to be able to use THC and not just CBD, it's going to be big time for these guys. I think it's really going to help them out a lot. The one place that surprised me a lot, and I was actually shook about this, was there was no eye coverage on their health care agreement. That's insane, to be honest. You need eyes to play football. You got to give them eye tests, right? But I think the one place the players win on this CBA is the new drugs. The new drug agreement. The types of suspensions. They're not losing your wages as much. And that. But where will this be a deal breaker? And I think it's that 17-game season. I think if you give the players 17 games, just move this bad boy up to 18, get rid of the preseason altogether, and increase the revenue share to 50%. And you've got players who are going to be down for the 18 games. And if you want to do this weird 17-game regular season, you add a second bye week. And one thing I read about was players would not want to play internationally in those later weeks of the season. And in the CBA, it says players will not have to play internationally in that 17th week. Well, that's great. But I know the Jacksonville Jaguars play like 4 games overseas, it feels like, every single year. You know, there's these teams that keep getting screwed over by playing games outside the United States and increasing their travel schedule a ton. And while you're traveling, it makes it a lot harder to recover from that game, from that last game, and you're going into the next game less prepared than you could have been because you're traveling so much. And that's negative. That negatively affects the players. But yeah, I think where these deals are broken are in that 17th game, the demand, the lack of total increase in the revenue share, and the lack of increase on a game-to-game basis. I think for a first draft of a CBA, this has a lot of positives, and we're going to be following this story closely here. But realistically, on this fact sheet, on what the NFL sent to the Players Association, there is a lot of good stuff, a lot of complicated stuff that I'm going to have to read through more to get well versed in this topic, and more. But with this new CBA, the Players Association already voted against it 6-5. So they needed 2/3 votes to pass it, and they did not get it. So when you look at this, the new playoff format is another thing I want to touch on before we move forward. So with the new format, 14 teams, that's nearly half the league. So like the NBA, where 16 teams get in, 14 teams would get in. That's kind of cool. Then you go down. So this is how it's going to work. That adds a third game to wildcard weekend, which either means 3 games apiece on Saturday and Sunday, or 1 game on that Monday. That third game would be between each conference's 2nd seed and the new 7th seed. Using this past season as an example, the 49ers and Ravens would have still earned byes as the top seeds, but the Packers and Chiefs would have faced the number 7 seeds, which would have been the Rams and the Steelers, who didn't make the postseason. So you look at those 7 seeds, and this tweet's from Andrew Siciliano. In 2019, it would have been the Steelers-Rams. In 2018, it would have been the Steelers-Vikings. In 2017, the Ravens and the Lions. In 2016, the Titans and the Buccaneers. And in 2015, the Jets and the Falcons. So that increases the importance of the regular season and gives you a first-round bye. But it doesn't really give you any reason to... It doesn't make the regular season that much more important because everyone's still playing for that 1 seed. It actually makes the 2 seed less important. And that might have just as adverse an effect as playing that 17th regular season game. You're dropping a preseason game. You're adding 2 more games to this. And I don't know how the revenue sharing works in the playoffs, but I think that's where a lot of players would be frustrated with this, is how that money changes. Because I'm pretty sure all the money you make in the playoffs comes from the bonus pay. And there'd have to be guaranteed money, and I think this is sort of something I think I saw in the XFL contracts, was players still get paid throughout the playoffs, and you'd have to work something in that for all 32 teams for players to continue to make a little bit more money as the league continues to make more money on just the 14 teams that make it. I'm not saying these other teams need as much money as the teams who made the playoffs, but a way to pay the players a little bit more for the product they put on the field for the entire season, sort of looking in a way as a bonus. And this is the statement. This is the statement the NFL put out from Mike Garafolo on the approval of the new CBA. So, following more than 10 months of intensive and thorough negotiations, the NFL players and clubs have jointly developed a comprehensive set of new and revised terms that will transform the future of the game, provide for players, past, present, and future, both on and off the field, and ensure that the NFL's second century is even better than more exciting for the fans. The membership voted today to accept the negotiated terms on principal elements of a new CBA. The Players Association would also need to vote to approve the same terms for there to be a new agreement. Since the clubs and players need to have a system in place and know the rules that they will operate under, by next week, the membership also approved moving forward under the final year of the 2011 CBA. If the players decide not to approve the negotiated terms out of respect for the process and our partners at the NFLPA, we will have no further comment on this at this time. So, they will extend the 2011 CBA 1 more year out of respect to the Players Association. I think that's a good move, and I think that shows the owners know this deal is not going to get done this year, which is true. It's not. This is going to be a long, drawn-out process. We're going to be talking about this a lot over the next 8 or 9 months. Players are going to be saying stuff they don't know about. Owners are going to be talking back to players. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a roller coaster ride. But if there's no football in 2 years, I'm going to be irate, and I'm going to be an angry host. So that's how we're going to do it. And that's what we're talking about on this new CBA deal. The next topic I want to hit on is the Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder fight. I'm not a fighting guy. I think I'm going to purchase the fight tomorrow night, though. But the absolutely unforgettable fight last time that these two put on ended in a draw. So Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury 2 is tomorrow night. It is Saturday, the 22nd. And this is the biggest fight in boxing since Mayweather-Pacquiao. Period. This is going to be at the MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas. I was just there. setup. It's already getting a little crazy in there with how everything's set up, and it's going to be awesome. So now, go listen to your favorite combat sports podcast. I'm just going to go through some of the betting stuff and sort of see what I want to see from this fight. So these guys are heavyweights. And I watched a sports science sort of segment on ESPN the other day about how Deontay Wilder gets so much power. And it's because he's got a 6'11 wingspan, and he's an extremely explosive athlete with an extremely explosive punch. Now, Tyson Fury is one of the most fundamentally sound boxers I think I've ever watched in my life, and by far the most fundamentally sound heavyweight I've ever seen. The way he moves and avoids punches reminds me of some of those old Muhammad Ali clips, and you wouldn't see that looking at his body, looking at his bald head, looking at the awkwardness. He just looks like this British dude who just walked out of a pub all the time, and I'm excited for it. So this already has beef. They shoved each other on stage at their introduction press conference, and they're not even doing a face-off after weigh-ins now. So there is some bad blood here, especially how it ended in the draw. So the odds here on this fight, Deontay Wilder is minus 125. He is still currently holding the champion, and this is for the WC heavyweight title. On the card, there is also another championship fight, Emmanuel Navarrete versus Geo Santissima, WBO super bantamweight title. And then there's just another bunch of filler fights. Boxing, to me, is not as fun as MMA. I am part of that new generation who prefers it. But when you look at what this fight brings, it brings two different styles. It takes a more traditional boxer. It takes a new style power puncher, super athletic, and when you read into this, there is a lot of interesting aspects when it comes to these fighters meeting. Both these fighters are unbeaten champions, and Wilder is making his 11th defense of the WBC belt. That's a lot of title defenses. Fury retaining the mythical title of lineal king for having still been the man who beat the man, going back to his 2015 upset of then recognized champion Vladimir Klitschko. So the drama's there. There's a ton of drama going into this fight. These are guys who don't lose in the ring. Even with Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao, Pacquiao has lost fights. Floyd Mayweather got to his 50-0. So this is interesting, and this is probably going to get a trilogy fight. Best 2 out of 3, and I think if they go 1-1 and tie, this is going to be like one of the greatest boxing series of all time. When you look back at that fight, you know, you get the power punches, you get all of the dodges from Fury. He was setting up Wilder very well. Wilder was getting his shots in, and Fury was eating these punches that no one else was able to eat. So Wilder, with his trash talk, is quoted saying, "It's laughable. I already consider his hands as pillows, and he ain't put nobody to sleep," Wilder said. "He don't have power as a fighter. You would think to be a big man or 250 pounds, he brings power to the table. He's a great boxer, but he don't have no power." For him to say he will knock me out in the second round, that's just the build-up for the promotion. So Wilder's obviously very confident. Fury's very confident. So Fury responded to that with a pretty dope quote here. "When I've got pillow-fisted hands and he gets knocked out by a guy who can't punch, that's going to look pretty damn ugly on his record." So pillow hands versus Persian magician armor from 300. That's how Deontay Wilder comes in. I just know that seeing that Wilder can throw his punches at 26 miles an hour, and they showed a visual representation on how fast his left jab and his right cross look, and you don't have time to react to that second punch, and that's amazing. And you know the craziest thing is Tyson Fury can react to that punch, and that shows just the level of athleticism these guys are competing at. They are two of the best in their sport, and that's what draws me to this. I love sports in general. I am a sports guy. College football is my favorite. The NFL is my second favorite. The NBA is my third favorite. The MLB is my fourth. And then you get all the other sports behind it. And then I'm just watching for great games. I don't have a favorite boxer. I haven't ever been a guy with a favorite boxer. But I love to watch boxing. I've never had a favorite UFC fighter. But I love to watch the UFC. Watching athletes compete on the highest level with no bias is one of the greatest feelings in the sport. And that's sort of how I'm going in. When I watched this fight the first time around, and Fury got knocked down and was laying like a dead man, and full-on Undertakered in a boxing match, I was like, we're watching the second one. There's going to be a second fight, we're watching it. Period. And that's what we said. And now we're watching it tomorrow night, and I'm going to have a lot of fun. It's $80. I don't care. You got the Gypsy King versus the Bronze Bomber. Both of them champions. Both of them gigantic men. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going for this fight, but I honestly think the biggest aspect of this fight is repetition. Or reputation, as I should say. Wilder's more powerful. He's more quick, but Fury is by far the more technically sound boxer. I think when it comes to a defensive fight, Fury's going to win this. I know Deontay Wilder's coming. He's talking a lot of mad game. And at any given time, one of his punches can land and sleep someone. But as we saw in that last fight, the Gypsy King's not getting slept. So really, I don't know if there's an edge here. I really think a lot of people are picking Wilder, and I honestly think if I had to make a decision right now, I'm going with Tyson Fury. There's just this feeling I'm getting from him. He's not mouthing off. He's just being confident. He's being collected. And I think going into a fight of this magnitude, the calmer, more collected fighter tends to have the advantage. And I give the advantage to Fury here. And I'm not a boxing guy. It's all gut feeling here. Just watching some of his fast fights on YouTube during my work hours and watching some of Deontay Wilder's past fights. Deontay's all about the power. If he is not making contact, you've got a shot to win. If you can get him off balance, and if you can get that left hand and that right hand combination not landing, it gives you have a shot. Obviously, no one's been able to do it, but there's also not another fighter as talented as Tyson Fury, especially from a defensive standpoint. So I really do believe fully that the defensive fighter is going to win this one. And I think if Wilder was going to win in a knockout, it would have happened in the last fight, and it didn't. So my prediction here is we're going to go with Fury, and that's how we're rolling. And I'm excited because I love sports. And we'll be talking about this Monday. And because I don't know much about boxing, there's a huge percent chance that I am going to get this wrong. So yeah, I'm excited. It's been a big day in news. We spent a lot of time on the CBA. We didn't spend much on the Fury versus Wilder fight. I'm just trying to bill it. I'm hoping we have some people who want to talk about it. I can't wait to hear about the build-up over these next couple of days or these next, 36 hours until this fight takes place or so. About 28 hours. I'm not the math guy. Looking at some sporting news. Some sports news today. One of them is JB Bickerstaff, the Cleveland Cavaliers coach, is taking over for John Beilein. John Beilein was let go, and I think when you read into that story, it's kind of funny that the players are like, we worked on too many fundamentals. And I know in the NBA, and I've heard this from so many people talking about the sport, is there's so many great, phenomenal athletes that go to the NBA and have no idea how to play the sport of basketball. You're 6'8", 6'9", you can play defense and you can dunk, you can survive in the NBA apparently. And when you have a college coach who thrives on developing players through fundamentals, some of those personalities aren't going to clash. And now, a lot of people on the team, and when this was first reported by the Athletic Cleveland and that crew there with let me find the names. I want to start sourcing more so you guys know where I'm getting my information from, so I'm not just talking to talk and getting all this stuff. So Kelsey Russo, Jason Lloyd, and Joe Vardone were the guys who were sort of leading the reporting on this. I know the story I read was from Kelsey Russo, and it sort of broke down why the players were having trouble with John Beilein, and a lot of it was from unidentified sources, so players on the team, and fundamentals was a big question mark about it. The amount of practice they were doing was a lot, so it's like you're getting paid to be a professional athlete. That means you're getting paid to practice. So I understand where John Beilein's frustrations were coming from, and with the attitude they had, there's a reason the Cavs are in the bottom of the barrel in the Eastern Conference, and they're a hard team to even watch and root for right now. Even when we had the Kyrie Irving Cavs that were like 16-66, and the only thing you'd turn that TV on for was to try to watch Kyrie Irving get like 50. That was it. We had that, and it was fun. This team is just unwatchable. The way the ball moves around is poor. You have a bunch of guards who are ISO heavy, dribblers who don't make the extra pass, don't have a real natural feel for the game. I'm talking to you, Colin Sexton. And they're the players who decided the future of John Beilein. Now, I'm not going to come here and defend John Beilein. He didn't seem like he was cut out for the job either. It was a bad match from the start. And next year, the Cavs are just going to be able to hit the reset button. I know the answer is not J.B. Biggerstaff. He's never been the answer. So let's keep moving forward. We'll find a coach that's a little younger, a little bit more pro basketball oriented, understands the pro game. But the one telling aspect about this was when former Bulls players came out, guys who played for Phil Jackson, former Lakers. Phil Jackson had these guys running the 3-court, full court weave, where you go 3 down and then 2 back against defenders, and working on those fundamentals every day, because those are important. Those get you ready to take on the more advanced stuff. And if you're an NBA player and you're not willing to get good at the little things, you're never going to be a great basketball player. You think LeBron's not willing to do those drills? You think Kobe Bryant is not willing to do those drills? They work extra hard at those drills because they know at the end of the day they're going to make them better basketball players. So yes, it bothers me what the Cavs organization's doing right now, and this is just typical Dan Gilbert stuff. And there's a reason the Cavs are so disrespected as a franchise. Period. I know another story in sports was when Antonio Brown got whacked in the head by his bench press machine. It looked horrifying, but couldn't happen to a better human being, that's for sure. Ohio State news. The 2 players, Amir Reep and Jocelyn Went, who were accused of felony rape and felony kidnapping, were indicted on their crimes in a Columbus, Franklin County court today. When you read into this story, it's horrible, and both these players were indicted on the 2 counts they were charged with, which means if any of you know anything about the legal system, once you're indicted by a grand jury, that means there is sufficient evidence that these players broke the law. Amir Reep is the one charged with the felony count of kidnapping, and Jocelyn Went is just charged with a felony count of rape. They face up to a maximum of 33 years in prison if they are convicted on all counts. Both men would also be required to register as sex offenders if they are convicted, Franklin County Prosecutor Ron O'Brien said in a statement. Reep and Went are scheduled to be arraigned in Franklin County Court of Common Pleas on March 6th. This story dates back to a February 11th news break of these players being arrested around 11:30 at night in Columbus, Ohio. This story is one that is continuing down a dark path, and listening to the Ohio State podcast I listen to on a weekly basis, 46 with A to B, I think Ari Wasserman put it in a really, really professional way. A lot of people see sports as an escape, but sometimes we get brought into the harsh reality that the people playing these sports are real people. And saying it that way, I sound like a bad person, but when someone's on your TV every day, you don't think of them the same as your neighbor Steve. And once these people do something bad or are put into a situation where they're put in negative lights, it creates a dark energy in a lot of people. And this is just a reminder that when you're watching sports, that these people are people and they make mistakes like everybody else. And they can commit heinous crimes and heinous acts towards people. And that's just something that he touched on very well, a lot more eloquently than I did. And if you guys want to give that podcast a listen to learn more on that situation, they'd be a good one to follow. And then to close out the show, we are going to discuss one more sports story. And we're just going to see what we come up with on one of these sports sites. David Ortiz. This one was interesting to me. It's about the Astros thing. And I told you I was going to talk about that today too. So David Ortiz on Mike Fiers. David Ortiz very much did not understand the whole story. Mike Fiers had been trying to blow the whistle on the whole Astros organization for much longer than people believed. And this is what David Ortiz said. He said, "I'm mad at this guy, the pitcher who came out talking about it. And let me tell you why. Oh, after you make your money, after you get your ring, you decide to talk about it? Why didn't you talk about it during the season when it was going on? Why didn't you say, I don't want to be no part of it? So you look like you're a snitch. Why you got to talk about it after? That's my problem. Why nobody said anything while it was going on?" The Houston Astros, I know they put themselves in a situation, and I just still don't know how come nobody was like, that is wrong. So when you talk about what Mike Fiers did, Mike Fiers came out and tried telling people about this stuff in the regular season. That's what got this whole investigation started. So no, he's not a snitch. And to think that is very short-sighted by Big Papi and very uneducated on the situation. If he just read the initial reports and the initial articles surrounding Mike Fiers, he'd know that. But I'm just assuming that that's not the sort of approach he wanted to take. The Red Sox are about to get in trouble for this too. So it's awkward that David Ortiz is pointing a finger when your beloved organization and your beloved franchise are about to get in trouble for a very similar thing. I'm not going to say the same thing, but a very similar thing. Now, this whole issue is not going to go over well. We're going to be talking about this for the next 12 months until Rob Manfred either comes down harder on the crime that the Astros committed or every single player takes justice into their own hands. There's a lot of stuff to talk about in sports today, but that's how we're going to close out the show. I think when you talk about CBAs, it's complicated, it's complex. We're going to be following it closely. When you talk about the 17th game being a deal breaker, I think that's pretty dumb. And we've got a big fight this weekend. So before I go, next show is going to be Monday. Quick turnaround because I'm getting back on schedule. No Vegas trip coming in the near future. I'll be enjoying some brewskis this weekend because I feel like I earned them for whatever I did this week. Don't know, but I'll be enjoying some nice Ohio microbrewery beers. And that is how I'm going to sign the show out today. Subscribe and rate the podcast. Thanks for listening.